An elderly woman was sharing her story about how her family had forgotten her at a rest stop during a road trip, leaving her stranded for hours until a kind stranger helped her. The comments were filled with outrage. How could they do that? To their own mother? What kind of monsters abandon a 75-year-old woman? What made my blood run cold wasn't just the cruelty of the story, it was that I was reading it while sitting in the exact same gas station where my own son's family had driven away and left me just 3 days ago. But here's what they didn't know when they abandoned their 70-year-old mother on Highway 85. I wasn't just some helpless old woman they could discard. I was the woman who still held the deed to the house they thought they owned. Let me tell you how I went from roadside victim to the one holding all the cards. It all started 6 months ago when my son, Marcus called me in tears. "Mom, we're in trouble," he said, his voice breaking. "Rebecca lost her job, and with the kids' school fees and the mortgage, we might lose the house." I had been living comfortably in my small retirement community in Phoenix, enjoying my book, club meetings, weekly bridge games, and the occasional trip to visit my sister in Colorado. At 70, I thought my days of financial rescuing were behind me. But hearing the desperation in Marcus's voice, the same voice that used to call me when he scraped his knee or had nightmares, I couldn't say no. "How much do you need?" I asked, already calculating how much I could access from my late husband's life insurance policy that I'd been saving for emergencies. $80,000 would cover the missed payments and give us a buffer, Marcus said, quietly. "Mom, I hate asking, but you're the only person we can turn to. The kids would be devastated if we had to move again. My grandchildren, sweet 12-year-old Emma and rambunctious 8-year-old Tyler. I'd already missed too much of their childhood living in a different state. The thought of them losing their home, their stability, broke my heart. Don't worry, sweetheart, I told him. Family takes care of family." Within a week, I had liquidated a significant portion of my retirement savings and wired the money to Marcus. But I wasn't naive. I'd learned from my late husband's business dealings to always protect myself. So I had my lawyer draw up a simple agreement. The $80,000 was a loan to be repaid within 2 years, and as collateral, I would hold a lien on their house until it was paid back. Marcus seemed a little surprised by the paperwork, but he signed without complaint. "Mom, you're a lifesaver. We'll have this paid back to you as soon as Rebecca finds work." That was the beginning of what I thought would be a temporary arrangement to help my son's family through a rough patch. I had no idea it was the first step toward the most humiliating and eye-opening experience of my life. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Marcus would call every Sunday, updating me on Rebecca's job search and the kids' activities. Emma was excelling in her art classes, and Tyler had made the school soccer team. They sent photos of family dinners and weekend outings, and I felt proud that my sacrifice had helped preserve their happiness. But then the calls became less frequent. When I did speak to Marcus, he seemed distracted, often cutting conversations short because they were heading out or in the middle of something. Rebecca, who used to chat with me during our calls, suddenly was never available when I phoned. "Is everything okay?" I asked during one particularly brief conversation in March. "You sound stressed." "Everything's fine, Mom," Marcus said quickly. "Just busy with work and the kids' activities. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was anymore. I was feeling increasingly disconnected from their lives, like an outsider looking in. When I suggested visiting for Tyler's birthday in April, Marcus hesitated. "Actually, Mom, this isn't the best time. Rebecca's parents are coming, and you know how cramped the house gets. Maybe next month?" Next month came and went without an invitation. When I brought up visiting for Emma's art show, there was another excuse. Rebecca's sister was staying with them. Marcus was traveling for work. The kids had too much homework to enjoy a proper visit. I started to feel like I was being managed rather than loved. Every conversation felt scripted, like Marcus was giving Me just enough information to keep me satisfied without actually letting me into their lives. But I pushed down my doubts. Surely I was overthinking things. They were just busy, just stressed about finances still. It wasn't until Emma accidentally answered Marcus's phone in late May that I got a glimpse of the truth. "Grandma Ruth!" she exclaimed excitedly. "I miss you so much. When are you coming to visit? Daddy keeps saying you're too busy, but I want to show you my room. We painted it purple." My heart clenched. Too busy? I hadn't been told about any room, painting, any of Emma's requests to see me. Before I could respond, I heard Marcus in the background. "Emma, give me the phone, now." "Hi, Mom," Marcus said, slightly breathless. "Sorry, Emma grabbed my phone while I was in the shower." "Marcus," I said carefully, "Emma seems to think I've been too busy to visit. What have you been telling the children?" There was a long pause. "Mom, it's just, you know kids. They mix things up. Look, I'm actually running late for a meeting. Can I call you back later?" He never called back that day, or the next. When I finally reached him 3 days later, he was polite but distant, giving me another update about his job and Rebecca's ongoing search for employment, but nothing about the kids asking for me or any possibility of a visit. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. If I wasn't welcome for an extended stay, maybe I could just surprise them with a quick visit. I booked a flight to Denver for the following weekend and rented a car at the airport. The drive to their suburban neighborhood in Thornfield took about an hour, and I spent it imagining the kids' delighted faces when they saw me at the door. Maybe Marcus was just trying to protect me from feeling obligated to visit when money was tight. Maybe Rebecca was embarrassed about their financial situation and didn't want me to see them struggling. But when I pulled into their driveway that Saturday afternoon, the scene before me shattered all my generous assumptions. The house looked nothing like the struggling family home I'd been imagining. The lawn was immaculate, clearly professionally maintained. There was a new BMW in the driveway alongside Marcus's truck, a far cry from the financial desperation he'd been describing. Through the large front windows, I could see expensive-looking furniture and what appeared to be a large flat-screen TV. But the real shock came when I rang the doorbell and heard Rebecca's voice call out, "Marcus, can you get that? I'm busy arranging the flowers for tonight's dinner party." Dinner party? They were entertaining while supposedly struggling to make ends meet on Rebecca's unemployment? Marcus opened the door, and his face went white when he saw me. "Mom! What? What are you doing here?" "Surprising my son and grandchildren," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the sinking feeling in my stomach. "May I come in?" He glanced nervously over his shoulder before stepping aside. "Of course, it's just, we weren't expecting anyone." As I stepped into the foyer, I could see Rebecca in the kitchen through the open archway. She was arranging an elaborate bouquet in what looked like a very expensive crystal vase. She looked up, saw me, and her expression immediately shifted from relaxed concentration to forced smile. "Ruth, what a surprise," she said, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. "We didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see the grandchildren," I said, looking around the beautifully appointed living room. "And catch up with all of you. It's been too long." "The kids are at birthday parties," Marcus said quickly. "Both of them. They'll be sorry they missed you." I looked at him carefully. "Both kids at birthday parties? On the same day?" "Different parties," Rebecca chimed in. "Emma's at her friend Madison's house, and Tyler's at a teammate's party." "You know how busy their social calendars are." Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. The house, their demeanor, the convenient absence of the children. It all felt staged somehow. "Well, I can wait," I said, settling into one of their plush armchairs. "I don't have anywhere else to be." I watched Marcus and Rebecca exchange a look, a quick worried glance that they thought I missed. Marcus cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, we have dinner plans tonight. Friends coming over. It's been planned for weeks. The dinner party? I said, remembering Rebecca's earlier comment. Of course. Well, maybe I could take the kids for ice cream tomorrow before I fly back. Tomorrow's really packed too, Rebecca said apologetically. Emma has art class, and Tyler has a soccer game, and then we promised to visit my parents. Every suggestion I made was met with another conflict, another excuse. After an hour of increasingly awkward conversation, it became clear that I wasn't welcome to stay. They weren't even trying to hide their relief when I finally said I should head back to my hotel. "We're so sorry the timing didn't work out," Marcus said, walking me to the door. "Maybe next time give us a heads up so we can clear our schedules?" As I drove away from their beautiful home in my rental car, I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't the struggling family I'd been supporting. This was a family that had used my money to maintain, or perhaps upgrade, their lifestyle while keeping me at arm's length, but I still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe Rebecca had found a good job, and they were embarrassed that they hadn't told me yet. Maybe they were planning to surprise me by paying back the loan early. Maybe I was reading too much into a single awkward visit. I decided to extend my trip by a few days and do a little investigating. If they were back on their feet financially, that was wonderful. But I deserved to know the truth about my investment in their lives. What I discovered over the next 3 days changed everything. A quick search of public records showed that Rebecca had not been unemployed. She'd been working at a marketing firm for the past 4 months, earning a salary that was actually higher than her previous job. The BMW in their driveway was purchased 2 months ago, financed with a down payment that coincidentally matched a good portion of the money I'd loaned them. But the real kicker came when I drove past their neighborhood that Sunday and saw Emma and Tyler playing in their front yard, not at the birthday parties or activities that had supposedly made them unavailable during my visit. I sat in my rental car at the end of their street, watching my grandchildren play on the lawn of the house I'd helped save, while processing the fact that my own son had lied to my face to avoid spending time with me. That evening, I called Marcus from my hotel room. "I need to know the truth," I said without preamble. "Is Rebecca working?" There was a long pause. "Mom, what's this about?" "It's about the fact that I've lent you $80,000 under the impression that you were struggling financially, and now I discover that's not exactly the case." Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus finally spoke, his tone was defensive. "We never said we weren't going to pay you back, and we never said Rebecca couldn't look for work. Just because she found something doesn't mean we're not still catching up from the months she was unemployed. Marcus, she's been working for 4 months. You bought a new car. You're having dinner parties. This isn't the struggling family you described to me." "Mom, I don't like your tone. We're grateful for your help, but that doesn't give you the right to monitor our spending or question our decisions." The conversation deteriorated from there. By the time I hung up, I realized that in my son's mind, I had become not a family member to be loved and included, but a creditor to be managed and avoided. That night, lying in my hotel bed, I made a decision that would ultimately save my dignity and my financial future. I called my lawyer first thing Monday morning and asked her to review the loan agreement I'd signed with Marcus. "Ruth," she said after looking over the documents, "you hold a valid lien on their property. If they default on payment terms, or if you feel the collateral is at risk, you have the right to call in the loan immediately." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means if they can't pay the full amount within 30 days of your demand, you can force the sale of the house to recover your money." I thanked her and hung up, not yet ready to take such a drastic step. I still hoped we could work things out as a family. But as I was about to learn, my son had a very different idea of how family worked. 2 weeks later, Marcus called with a proposition that revealed just how little he understood about respect, gratitude, or basic human decency. "Mom," he said, his voice taking on the same tone he'd used as a teenager when asking to borrow the car. "Rebecca and I have been talking, and we think it would be great if you moved in with us." For a moment, my heart leaped. Finally, an invitation into their lives. "Really?" "Yeah, we've been thinking about how nice it would be to have you closer to the kids. And with the house so big, we have plenty of space." "That's wonderful, Marcus. I've been hoping, and the best part is," he continued, "you could cancel your lease at the retirement community and stop paying all that rent. Think of how much money you'd save. Plus, you could help out with the kids' schedules and maybe some light housework. Rebecca's been so busy with her new job." The enthusiasm in my voice died. "Help out with housework?" "Well, yeah. I mean, if you're living here anyway, it would be great to have an extra pair of hands. The kids love you, and you're such a good cook. It would be like having a live-in grandmother." As he talked, the picture became clearer. They weren't inviting me to join their family. They were recruiting me to be their unpaid household help. They wanted me to give up my independence, my home, my life, to become their childcare provider and domestic worker. "What about the loan?" I asked. "Would living there affect our repayment agreement?" "Oh, well, if you're living with us and not paying rent elsewhere, you probably wouldn't need us to pay you back as quickly, right? I mean, you'd be saving so much money." There it was. They wanted me to forgive the debt in exchange for the privilege of becoming their servant. "Let me think about it," I said. "Sure, but don't take too long." Rebecca's already excited about having help with the kids' summer schedule. After I hung up, I sat in my comfortable apartment in Phoenix, looking around at my books, my photos, my small but dignified life, and I realized something important. I'd rather live independently and alone than be taken for granted by people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. I called Marcus back the next day. "I've decided not to move in with you," I said. "What? Why not?" "Mom, this is a great opportunity. For you, maybe, not for me. I like my life here." His voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. "Mom, that's pretty selfish. We're offering you a chance to be close to your grandchildren, and you're choosing your social activities over family? I'm choosing self-respect over being used." "Used?" "Mom, we're family. Family helps each other." "You're right," I said. "Family does help each other, which is why I expect the loan to be repaid according to our agreement." The silence on the other end was deafening. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was cold. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, we'll pay back your precious money. But don't expect us to pretend we're not disappointed in your priorities." That conversation happened in early June. By the end of June, I still hadn't received a payment, or even a communication about a payment plan. When I called to ask about it, Marcus was short and irritated. "We're working on it, Mom. These things take time." July came and went with no payment and no communication. When I tried calling in early August, my calls started going to voicemail more often than not. When Marcus did answer, he was dismissive. "Mom, you need to be patient. We said we'd pay you back, and we will." "When?" "When we can." That's when I realized they never intended to pay me back at all. They'd gotten my money, upgraded their lifestyle, and now they were hoping I'd just forget about it or die before collecting. I was preparing to call my lawyer and demand immediate repayment when Marcus called me with what he probably thought was an olive branch. "Mom, we're planning a family road trip for Labor Day weekend. Colorado Springs, maybe some hiking, definitely some scenic drives. We thought you might like to join us." I was surprised and, I'll admit, touched. Maybe they were ready to include me properly in their lives. "That sounds lovely," I said. "Great. We'll pick you up Friday morning. Pack light. We'll only be gone 3 days." For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about our relationship. Maybe the money issues had just been stress and misunderstandings. Maybe this trip would help us reconnect as a family. I spent Thursday evening carefully packing a small suitcase with comfortable clothes for hiking and a nice outfit for dinners out. I bought small gifts for Emma and Tyler, a sketchbook for Emma and a new soccer ball for Tyler. I even packed homemade cookies, thinking we could have a picnic along the way. Friday morning, I was ready and waiting when Marcus pulled up in their SUV. Rebecca was in the passenger seat, and the kids were in the back, both glued to tablets. "Hi, Grandma Ruth," Emma called out as I climbed into the third row. "Are you excited for our adventure?" "Very excited, sweetheart," I said, settling in next to Tyler, who gave me a quick hug before returning to his game. The first few hours of the drive were pleasant. We chatted about the kids' summer activities, Rebecca's job, and Marcus's work. The children showed me pictures on their tablets and shared their excitement about seeing mountains and maybe spotting wildlife. We stopped for lunch at a family restaurant in a small town whose name I didn't catch. The kids were restless from the car ride, and everyone seemed ready for a break. After we ate, Marcus suggested the kids use the restroom and maybe run around in the small playground next to the restaurant while the adults finished their coffee. "Mom," Rebecca said once the children were out of earshot, "we've been meaning to talk to you about something." "Oh?" Marcus leaned forward. "It's about the loan situation. We've been thinking, and we realized that expecting us to pay back that money might not be realistic." I set down my coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "Well," Rebecca continued, "when you loaned us the money, you knew we were struggling. Now that we're back on our feet, we've got new expenses. The kids' activities, maintaining the house, building our savings back up. Asking us to pay you back $80,000 would just put us right back where we started. But you agreed to the terms," I said quietly. "That was when we were desperate," Marcus said. "We weren't thinking clearly. Mom, you don't really need that money, do you? You've got your pension, your retirement savings. We're just starting out in life." I stared at my son, my 45-year-old son who owned a beautiful home and earned a six-figure salary, talking about just starting out in life, while suggesting that I, a 70-year-old widow on a fixed income, should just write off the money. I'd loaned him in good faith. The agreement we signed says, "Mom," Marcus interrupted, "forget the paperwork for a minute. We're talking about family here. Is money really more important to you than your relationship with your son and grandchildren?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "You're saying that if I expect you to honor your commitment, I'm choosing money over family? We're saying that if you insist on treating us like debtors instead of family, it's going to damage our relationship," Rebecca said. "The kids are already picking up on the tension." I looked out the window at Emma and Tyler playing on the swings, laughing and carefree. "The children don't know anything about this. They know you've been distant," Marcus said. "They know you haven't visited, that you turned down our invitation to move in with us. They're starting to think Grandma Ruth doesn't want to spend time with them." The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. They were using my grandchildren's feelings as weapons against me. "I think we should head back to the car," I said, standing up. The rest of the afternoon drive was tense. The children sensed the change in mood and became quieter, asking fewer questions and retreating into their tablets. We stopped for gas and snacks in a small mountain town, and I noticed that Marcus and Rebecca were having whispered conversations while the kids picked out candy. When we got back on the road, Marcus announced that we were going to make one more stop before reaching our hotel. "There's supposed to be an amazing viewpoint just a few miles up this highway," he said. "We can stretch our legs and take some pictures." The viewpoint turned out to be a rest stop on a remote stretch of Highway 85, surrounded by nothing but mountains and sparse trees. There were a few picnic tables, some vending machines, and a small visitor center that appeared to be closed. Only one other car was in the parking lot. "Isn't this beautiful?" Rebecca said as we all climbed out of the SUV. "Kids, go explore a little bit, but stay where we can see you." Emma and Tyler ran off toward the picnic area while the adults stood near the car, admiring the mountain views. I was taking a photo with my phone when I heard car doors slamming. I turned around to see Marcus starting the engine. "What are you doing?" I called out. Rebecca was already in the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I could see Emma and Tyler, in the back seat looking confused. Marcus rolled down his window. "Mom, we've decided this isn't working out. The kids are uncomfortable with all the tension, and frankly, so are we." "What are you talking about?" "Marcus, get out of the car. We think it's better if you find your own way back to Phoenix. Give you some time to think about what's really important." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're leaving me here? In the middle of nowhere?" "There's a visitor center, and I'm sure someone will come along who can help you figure out transportation," Rebecca said through her rolled-down window. "Maybe this will give you some perspective on what family really means." "Marcus," I said, stepping closer to the car. "Don't do this. We can work this out. We already tried, Mom. You made your choice when you chose money over family. Now you can live with the consequences." Emma pressed her face to the window, looking scared and confused. "Daddy, why are we leaving Grandma Ruth?" "We'll explain later, sweetheart," Rebecca said. "Just sit back and buckle your seatbelt." "Wait!" I shouted, but Marcus was already putting the car in drive. I watched in disbelief as my son drove away, taking my grandchildren with him, leaving me standing alone in a remote rest stop with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. My suitcase, my medication, my return flight ticket. Everything was in that SUV disappearing down the mountain highway. For several minutes, I just stood there, unable to process what had happened. Then the reality of my situation hit me. I was 70 years old, stranded on a mountain highway, with no transportation and no way to contact anyone except through my cell phone, which showed only one bar of service. That's when I walked into the small gas station attached to the rest stop, bought a cup of coffee with shaking hands, and sat down to figure out what to do next. And that's when I saw the Facebook post about the elderly woman whose family had abandoned her at a rest stop. As I read the outraged comments from strangers who couldn't believe anyone could be so cruel to their own mother, I realized something important. I wasn't going to be a victim of this story. I was going to be the one who fought back. Sitting in that gas station, reading that Facebook post while my coffee grew cold, I felt something shift inside me. The initial shock and hurt were giving way to something harder, more focused. But first, I had to deal with my immediate situation. I was stranded 200 miles from the nearest major airport, with no luggage, no medication, and no clear way home. The gas station attendant, a young man named Jake, who couldn't have been more than 25, noticed me sitting there for over an hour and approached with genuine concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? You look like you might need some help." I looked up at this stranger, this young man who was showing me more kindness than my own son had, and felt tears threaten again. But I pushed them back. I couldn't afford to break down now. "My family left me here," I said simply. "I need to figure out how to get back to Phoenix." Jake's eyes widened. "They left you here? Like, abandoned you?" When I nodded, his expression hardened with the same outrage I'd seen in those Facebook comments. "That's messed up. Hold on. Let me see what I can do." For the next hour, Jake became my guardian angel. He called his manager to explain the situation, looked up bus routes and rental car options, and even offered to let me use the station's landline to make calls since my cell service was so poor. My first call was to my sister, Helen in Colorado. When she answered and heard my voice, she immediately knew something was wrong. "Ruth? You sound terrible. What's happened?" I told her everything. The abandoned loan payments, the manipulation, and finally the highway abandonment. The silence on the other end was so long I thought we'd lost connection. "Helen, are you there?" "I'm here," she said, her voice tight with fury. "I'm just trying to process the fact that my nephew abandoned his 70-year-old mother on a mountain highway." "Ruth, I'm coming to get you right now." "Helen, you don't have to." "The hell I don't. Text me the address of that gas station. I'll be there in 3 hours." While I waited for Helen, Jake brought me sandwiches and kept checking on me. He even let me use the station's Wi-Fi to access my email and banking apps on my phone. That's when I discovered something that made my blood boil even hotter. There were 2 recent charges on my credit card, charges I hadn't made, a $500 charge at an electronics store in Thornfield, and a $300 charge at a high-end restaurant, both made while I was sitting in this gas station, stranded and abandoned. Marcus and Rebecca had taken my credit card information from previous purchases and were using it while I was literally stranded on the side of the road. I immediately called my bank to report the fraud and had the charges reversed and my card canceled. But the audacity of it, stealing from me while leaving me stranded, revealed a level of callousness that even I hadn't expected. When Helen arrived, she took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. My sister was 5 years younger than me, but had always been the fighter in the family. She owned a successful catering business in Denver and had never married, preferring her independence to what she called the complications of managing other people's feelings. "Those bastards," she said without preamble as we drove away from the gas station. "Ruth, I've never liked Marcus, and now I know why. There was always something selfish about that boy. Helen, he's still my son. He's a grown man who abandoned his elderly mother on a highway," she snapped. "Stop making excuses for him. What are you going to do about this?" I stared out the window at the mountain scenery that had seemed so beautiful just hours ago when I was anticipating a family vacation. Now it just looked cold and indifferent. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to call him and demand an explanation. Part of me wants to pretend this never happened and just go home." "And what about the money? The $80,000? "I have legal options," I said slowly. "My lawyer explained that I can force the sale of the house if they default on the loan." Helen glanced at me sharply. "Do it." "Helen." "Ruth, listen. To me. I've been watching you let people walk all over you your entire life. First with Charles when he spent money you didn't have on his business ventures. Then with Marcus when he guilted you into paying for everything from college to his wedding to his house down payment. When is enough enough?" She was right, and I knew it. My late husband Charles had been a dreamer who was always one investment away from making it big. I'd spent 30 years enabling his financial fantasies, cleaning up his messes, and rebuilding our savings after his failures. When he died 5 years ago, I'd thought I was finally free to make sensible financial decisions. But then Marcus had come along with his crisis, and I'd fallen right back into the same pattern, sacrificing my security for someone else's comfort. They used my credit card while I was stranded, I told Helen. Spent $800 while I was sitting in that gas station with no way home. Helen's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Those absolute pieces of shit. Ruth, promise me you'll call your lawyer tomorrow." "I will," I said, and I meant it. Helen insisted I stay with her that night instead of flying back to Phoenix immediately. She wanted to make sure I was emotionally stable before I made any major decisions. We sat in her cozy kitchen until nearly midnight, drinking wine and talking through everything that had happened. "The thing that kills me," I said, "is that I really thought this trip was their way of trying to repair our relationship. I bought gifts for the kids. I made cookies. I was so hopeful." "They planned this," Helen said bluntly. "Think about it, Ruth. They picked you up, drove you to the middle of nowhere, had that conversation about the loan, and then abandoned you when you didn't cave to their demands. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was calculated." The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. The location they'd chosen was remote enough that I couldn't easily get help, but not so remote that they could be charged with endangering my life. The timing, after they'd made their demands clear and I'd refused to budge. Even the way they'd manipulated the children, making sure Emma and Tyler saw me being left behind so they'd think Grandma Ruth was the problem. "They wanted to break me," I said quietly. "They thought if they humiliated me enough, scared me enough, I'd come crawling back and agree to anything." "Well," Helen said, raising her wine glass, "they fucked with the wrong woman." That night, Lying in Helen's guest room, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to call Marcus to beg for an explanation or an apology. I wasn't going to pretend this was a misunderstanding that could be worked out with family counseling and forgiveness. I was going to treat this like what it was: theft, fraud, and elder abuse by people who had forfeited any claim to my mercy. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Margaret, from Helen's kitchen while my sister made breakfast. "Ruth, thank God you're calling," Margaret said. "I've been trying to reach you. I got a very strange call from Marcus yesterday demanding to know how to remove the lien from his house. When I told him only you could authorize that, he became quite hostile." "He called you?" "He seemed to think the lien was some kind of mistake or oversight. He said you'd agreed to forgive the loan and that I needed to file paperwork immediately to clear the title. When I explained that I'd need written authorization from you, he accused me of overstepping my bounds and threatened to report me to the Bar Association." I felt a cold fury settle in my stomach. "Margaret, I want to call in the loan. Today." "Are you sure?" "Once we start this process, there's no going back. If they can't pay the full amount within 30 days, we'll have to force the sale of the house." "I'm sure. What changed your mind?" I told her about the highway abandonment, the credit card fraud, and Marcus's call to her office. By the time I finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Ruth," she said finally, "I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of family financial disputes. But this is elder abuse. Have you considered filing criminal charges?" "I just want my money back and to be left alone." "I understand. I'll prepare the demand letter today. But Ruth, I want you to consider something. If they're willing to abandon you on a highway and steal from your credit card, what else might they be willing to do when they realize you're serious about collecting this debt?" Margaret's warning proved to be prophetic. The demand letter was delivered to Marcus and Rebecca's house on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop with calls from Marcus that I refused to answer. He left increasingly frantic voicemails. "Mom, we need to talk about this lawyer letter. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Mom, please call me back. We can work this out without getting lawyers involved." "Mom, you're being ridiculous. We never said we wouldn't pay you back." "Mom, if you don't call me back by tonight, I'm driving to Phoenix to sort this out in person." I didn't call him back. Wednesday morning, I received a call from an unknown number with a Colorado area code. "Ruth, this is Rebecca. Please don't hang up." "What do you want, Rebecca?" "I want to apologize. What happened on the highway? That wasn't supposed to happen like that. Marcus was just so frustrated, and we all said things we didn't mean." "You didn't say anything, Rebecca. You drove away and left me stranded." I know, and I feel terrible about it. But Ruth, this lawyer letter is really extreme. We never said we wouldn't pay you back. We just needed more time. You had 8 months. You bought a new car instead of making payments. That was a necessary purchase. Marcus's truck was having problems, and we need reliable transportation for the kids. I almost laughed at the audacity. "Rebecca, I'm done with the excuses. You have 30 days to pay the full amount, or the house goes on the market." "Ruth, please be reasonable. We can't possibly come up with $80,000 in 30 days. The kids are just getting settled in school. Emma's doing so well in her art classes. Tyler made the travel soccer team. You can't seriously be considering destroying their stability over money." There it was again, using my grandchildren as emotional weapons. "You should have thought about their stability before you abandoned their grandmother on a highway." "Ruth, I'm begging you. Give us 6 months. We'll pay you back with interest. Just please don't force us to sell the house." "Rebecca, you've had 8 months already. You've made 0 payments and spent my money on luxuries while lying to me. About your financial situation, the answer is no." "Fine," Rebecca said, her voice suddenly cold. "You want to play hardball? We can play hardball too. Don't think the kids won't know exactly why they had to leave their home and their friends. Don't think they won't know that their grandmother chose money over their happiness. Are you threatening to poison my grandchildren against me? I'm telling you that actions have consequences. You want to destroy this family over money? Fine, but Emma and Tyler will know exactly who's responsible. She hung up before I could respond. That evening, I got a call from my neighbor at the retirement community in Phoenix. Ruth, honey, are you okay? There's been a man here asking questions. About you? What kind of questions? He said he was your son, wanted to know if you were mentally competent, if you'd been making strange decisions lately. He asked if I'd noticed any signs of dementia or confusion. He seemed very concerned about your welfare. My blood ran cold. Marcus was laying the groundwork to challenge my mental competency. Mrs. Patterson, if anyone else comes around asking questions about me, please don't answer them. And please call me immediately. Of course, dear. Is everything all right? It will be. I hung up and immediately called Margaret. They're trying to build a case that I'm mentally incompetent, I told her. That's not uncommon in these situations, unfortunately. Family members often claim diminished capacity when an elderly relative makes financial decisions they don't like. But Ruth, you're sharp as a tack, and we have documentation of all your decisions being carefully considered and legally sound. What should I do? Document everything, every phone call, every interaction. If they continue harassing your neighbors or making claims about your mental state, we can pursue restraining orders. But Ruth, I think you should consider having an independent mental competency evaluation done. Why? Because if this goes to court, you want ironclad proof that you were of sound mind when you made these decisions. It removes their ability to claim you were confused or manipulated. The next morning, I drove to a neuropsychologist Margaret recommended and underwent 4 hours of cognitive testing. The results were unambiguous. I was functioning at the high end of normal for my age group, with no signs of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. Armed with this documentation, I felt more confident about moving forward. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Thursday evening, I was making dinner when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Emma and Tyler standing on my doorstep, looking small and confused. Behind them stood a woman I didn't recognize. I opened the door cautiously. Emma? Tyler? What are you doing here? Grandma Ruth! Emma threw herself at me, tears streaming down her face. I missed you so much. Daddy said you didn't want to see us anymore. Tyler hung back, looking uncertain. The woman stepped forward. Mrs. Brooks? I'm Sarah Chen from Colorado. Child Services. I need to speak with you about some concerns that have been raised regarding your grandchildren's welfare. My heart stopped. What concerns? May we come in? The children have been through quite an ordeal, and I think it's best if we discuss this privately. I let them into my living room, my mind racing. Emma and Tyler sat close together on my couch, Emma still sniffling and Tyler looking scared. Mrs. Brooks, Sarah said, we received a report that you abandoned these children during a family trip, leaving them stranded without adult supervision while you pursued a personal dispute with their parents. I stared at her in disbelief. I abandoned them? They abandoned me. The report indicates that you became agitated during a family discussion about financial matters and walked away from the vehicle, leaving the children alone and frightened while their parents searched for you. That's not what happened at all. Grandma. Ruth, Emma said quietly, Daddy said you were mad at us and didn't want to be our grandma anymore. He said that's why you walked away at the mountain place. I knelt down in front of my granddaughter, my heart breaking. Emma, sweetheart, I would never walk away from you and Tyler. I love you both more than anything in the world. Then why didn't you come home with us? Tyler asked, speaking for the first time. I looked at Sarah, who was watching the interaction carefully. Mrs. Chen, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. The children's parents left me at that rest stop, not the other way around. That's not what they reported, Mrs. Brooks. They said you became argumentative about money and stormed off. And when they couldn't find you, they had no choice but to continue home with the children and contact authorities. They're lying. Mrs. Brooks, I understand this is upsetting, but I need to focus on the children's welfare right now. They've been very distressed since this incident. Their parents are concerned that your financial demands are creating an unstable environment for the family. I realized what was happening. Marcus and Rebecca had reported me to Child Services, claiming I was the one who had abandoned the children. They were using my grandchildren as weapons and simultaneously trying to paint me as an unfit grandmother. Mrs. Chen, there seems to be some confusion about what actually happened. I have documentation. Mrs. Brooks, I'm not here to mediate your dispute with the children's parents. I'm here because Emma and Tyler have expressed a strong desire to see you, and their parents agreed to supervised visitation while we sort out the situation. Supervised visitation? I'll be staying for the duration of their visit to ensure their safety and well-being. I spent the next 2 hours with my grandchildren under the watchful eye of a social worker, pretending everything was normal, while inside I was raging at the manipulation and lies that had brought us to this point. Emma showed me drawings she'd made of our family, and Tyler told me about his soccer team making it to the playoffs. They seemed confused about why there was a stranger watching us, and why they couldn't spend the night like they used to. When it was time for them to leave, Emma clung to me again. Grandma Ruth, will you come visit us soon? Our house feels sad without you. I hope so, sweetheart. I love you so much. As I watched Sarah drive away with my grandchildren, I called Margaret immediately. They reported me to Child Services. They're claiming I abandoned the children instead of the other way around. Those bastards, Margaret said. Ruth, this is psychological warfare. They're trying to break you down, make you choose between your financial rights and access to your grandchildren. What can I do? We fight back. I'm going to need every detail about what happened on that highway. Every conversation, every text message, every piece of evidence. And Ruth? Yes? Don't back down. If you give in to this manipulation, it will never end. They'll hold your grandchildren hostage every time they want something from you. That night, I sat in my apartment writing down everything I could remember about the highway incident. Every word that was spoken, every detail about the timing and location. I gathered my credit card statements showing the fraudulent charges, the dates and times of phone calls, everything. But as I worked, I kept thinking about Emma's tear-stained face and Tyler's confused questions. Marcus and Rebecca were using my love for my grandchildren as a weapon against me. And it was working. For a moment, I considered calling Margaret and telling her to withdraw the loan demand. Maybe I could live with losing the money if it meant staying in my grandchildren's lives. But then I remembered sitting in that gas station, abandoned and scared, while Marcus and Rebecca were using my credit card to buy themselves dinner. I remembered Rebecca's cold threat about making sure the children knew I was responsible for destroying their family. These people had shown me exactly who they were. Giving in to their demands wouldn't make them better people. It would just teach them that cruelty and manipulation worked. I picked up my phone and called Margaret, leaving a voicemail. Margaret, it's Ruth. I've decided something. I want you to be as aggressive as legally possible with the loan collection. And I want to explore every option for criminal charges, the credit card fraud, the abandonment, everything. They want to play dirty? Fine. But they picked the wrong woman to mess with. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I would start documenting everything for the authorities. Tonight, I would mourn the family I thought I had and prepare for the war I never wanted to fight. But I was done being a victim. As I sat in my quiet apartment, I realized something important. For 70 years, I had been trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect grandmother. I had sacrificed my own needs, my own dignity, my own financial security to keep other people comfortable. And what had it gotten me? A son who thought he could abandon me on a highway and steal from me with impunity. A daughter-in-law who threatened to poison my grandchildren against me. A family that saw me not as a person to be loved and respected, but as a resource to be managed and exploited. Well, no more. I opened my laptop and began researching private investigators in the Denver area. If Marcus and Rebecca wanted to play games with false reports and character assassination, I needed to make sure I had all the facts on my side. I also started a detailed journal, documenting every interaction, every phone call, every attempt at manipulation. If this was going to be a war, I was going to fight it with documentation, evidence, and the truth. But most importantly, I was going to fight it without guilt. I had spent enough of my life feeling guilty for other people's bad choices. Marcus and Rebecca had made their decisions when they chose to abandon me on that highway. Now they were going to live with the consequences. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I had work to do, and I was going to do it methodically and thoroughly. First, I called a private investigator named David Martinez who came highly recommended. Mrs. Brooks, I've handled several cases like this. Adult children who financially exploit elderly parents often leave extensive paper trails. With your permission, I'd like to investigate their financial records, social media activity, and any other documentation that might support your case. Do whatever you need to do. I should warn you. Sometimes what we find isn't pretty. Are you prepared for that? Mr. Martinez, they abandoned me on a highway and are now using my grandchildren as weapons against me. I'm prepared for anything. Next, I called my bank and credit card companies to get detailed records of all transactions, including the fraudulent charges from Labor Day weekend. Then I called an elder law attorney that Margaret had recommended, someone who specialized in financial abuse cases. Mrs. Brooks, attorney Linda Walsh said, based on what you've told me, you have grounds for criminal charges of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud. The highway abandonment alone could be considered reckless endangerment. I want to pursue every option. I need to ask you something difficult. Are you prepared for the possibility that criminal charges could mean your son goes to jail? I thought about that for a long moment. 5 days ago, I would have said no immediately. The thought of Marcus in jail would have horrified me. But that was before he left me stranded on a mountain highway. Before he stole from my credit card while I was sitting in a gas station trying to figure out how to get home. Before he filed false reports to try to take away my access to my grandchildren. Yes, I said. I'm prepared for that. Then, let's get started. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Powerful. Not powerful in a cruel or vindictive way, but powerful in the way that comes from finally standing up for yourself after a lifetime of being pushed around. Marcus and Rebecca thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman who would cave to their threats and manipulation. They thought wrong. I was about to show them exactly what this 70-year-old woman was capable of when she finally decided to stop playing nice. Within 48 hours of hiring private investigator David Martinez, I learned that my son and daughter-in-law were even more duplicitous than I had imagined. The truth about their financial situation wasn't just disappointing, it was criminal. David called me on a Friday morning, his voice grim. Mrs. Brooks, I need to meet with you in person. What I've discovered is extensive. Can you come to my office this afternoon? That bad? Worse than you think. I drove to David's downtown Phoenix office with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Part of me didn't want to know what he'd found. The other part of me needed to understand exactly who I was dealing with. David's office was cluttered but organized, walls covered with certificates and commendations from his 20 years as a police detective before going private. He gestured for me to sit across from his desk, which was covered with printed documents, photographs, and what looked like financial records. Mrs. Brooks, I'm going to be direct with you. Your son and daughter-in-law have been running what amounts to a sophisticated financial fraud operation, and you're not their only victim. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Let's start with their employment situation. You said Rebecca claimed to be unemployed when they asked for the loan? Yes. That was the whole reason they needed the money. She'd lost her job. David slid a document across the desk. Rebecca never lost her job. In fact, she got a promotion 3 months before they contacted you for money. Her salary increased from $75,000 to $95,000 annually. I stared at the employment verification form. But Marcus said, Marcus lied. But it gets worse. He pulled out another set of documents. They didn't need money to save their house. They were never behind on their mortgage. The $80,000 you gave them? They used it to pay off credit card debt from a gambling problem. Gambling? Marcus has been betting on sports through online platforms for over 2 years. Based on his bank records, he's lost approximately $150,000 during that time. The house was never in jeopardy. Their credit cards were maxed out from covering his losses. I felt sick. So everything they told me was a lie. Everything. But, Mrs. Brooks, it gets worse. Much worse. David opened a thick folder and spread out several pages. I found evidence that this isn't the first time they've done this. 2 years ago, they borrowed $25,000 from Rebecca's parents under the pretense of needing money for Tyler's medical expenses. Tyler doesn't have medical problems. Exactly. The money went straight to covering Marcus's gambling debts. Rebecca's parents are elderly, live on a fixed income, and never got their money back. When they started asking questions, Marcus and Rebecca cut off contact completely. Rebecca's parents haven't seen their grandchildren in over a year, was speechless. Marcus and Rebecca had a pattern of financially exploiting elderly family members and then discarding them when they became inconvenient. There's more, David continued. I found social media posts from Rebecca's Instagram account, posts she thought were private but weren't properly secured. Take a look at this. He showed me printed screenshots from Rebecca's social media. The posts were from various dates over the past 8 months, all showing expensive purchases, lavish dinners, and luxury items. But what made my blood boil were the captions. New designer handbag, thanks to M's generous mom. Blessed not your family money. Date night at the most expensive restaurant in town. Love when family helps out. Living our best life. Marcus deserves the best. His sweet mom made sure he could get these new golf clubs. Spoiled, ungrateful. She was bragging about spending my money, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It gets worse. Look at this post from last month. The screenshot showed a photo of their beautifully renovated kitchen with the caption, Kitchen renovation complete. When family loans you money but you never have to pay it back. Some people are so gullible. Free upgrade, yar sucker born. Felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She called me gullible. She called me a sucker. Mrs. Brooks, based on these posts and their financial records, they never intended to pay you back. This was planned theft from the beginning. David pulled out another document. And here's something that might interest you regarding the Child Services report. I found text messages between Rebecca and her sister discussing their strategy. He handed me printed text messages. Rebecca, the old bitch is trying to take our house. We need to play hardball. Sister, what are you thinking? Rebecca, Marcus is calling CPS to report her for abandoning the kids on the highway. We're going to flip the script and make her look like the unstable one. Sister, isn't that illegal? False reporting? Rebecca, only if we get caught. The kids will back us up because they don't know what really happened. It's our word against hers, and who's going to believe a bitter old woman over concerned parents? Sister, what if she has evidence? Rebecca, What evidence? She was alone when we left her. No witnesses except the kids, and they'll say whatever we tell them to say. I was shaking with rage. They coached my grandchildren to lie about what happened. It appears so. And Mrs. Brooks, there's something else. About the credit card charges while you were stranded. They didn't just steal your information from previous purchases. Marcus has been systematically collecting financial information from you for months. David showed me more documents. Every time you visited their house, Marcus was photographing your credit cards, bank statements, any financial documents you had with you. He's been building a file on your accounts and assets. Why? Because they were planning for this exact scenario. If you ever tried to collect on the loan, they wanted to be able to access your accounts to steal enough money to disappear if necessary. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't just about avoiding paying back a loan. They had been systematically planning to rob me blind. David, I need to ask you something. Are my grandchildren safe? His expression grew serious. Based on what I've found, I don't believe Marcus and Rebecca would physically harm the children. But Mrs. Brooks, they're using those children as tools in a psychological warfare campaign against you. That's a form of emotional abuse. What do you recommend? First, we turn over everything I've found to the police and the district attorney's office. What they've done isn't just civil fraud, it's criminal. Second, we get this information to your lawyer immediately. The evidence I've gathered completely destroys any claim they might make about your mental competency or their own credibility. And third, we prepare for them to escalate. People like this don't go down quietly. When they realize their scheme is falling apart, they'll likely become more desperate and more dangerous. I left David's office with a thick folder of evidence and a new understanding of exactly what I was up against. Marcus and Rebecca weren't just selfish or financially irresponsible, they were predators who had targeted me specifically because they thought I was an easy mark. That evening, I called Margaret and Linda Walsh for an emergency conference call to review David's findings. Jesus Christ, Linda said after I'd summarized the evidence. Ruth, this is organized criminal activity. The false CPS report alone is a felony. But combined with the identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy, we're looking at serious prison time for both of them. What's our next step? We take this to the police immediately, Margaret said. With this evidence, they'll have no choice but to open a criminal investigation. What about my grandchildren? If Marcus and Rebecca are arrested, what happens to Emma and Tyler? That depends, Linda said. Do they have other family who could take custody temporarily? I thought about it. Rebecca's parents, but Marcus and Rebecca cut them off after stealing from them too. My sister Helen might be willing to help, but she's never had children. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Linda said. Right now, the priority is stopping them before they can steal from you again or manipulate the legal system further. Monday morning, I walked into the Phoenix Police Department with David Martinez, Margaret, and Linda Walsh. We met with Detective Sarah Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit, who spent 3 hours reviewing our evidence. Mrs. Brooks, Detective Rodriguez said, "This is one of the most comprehensive financial elder abuse cases I've seen. We're going to open an immediate investigation, and I'm recommending that the DA file charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, filing, false police reports, and elder abuse. How long will that take? With evidence this strong, we should have arrest warrants within a week. What about the children? We'll coordinate with Colorado authorities since that's where the children reside. They'll need to do a welfare check and determine appropriate temporary custody if arrests are made." As we left the police station, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice was finally going to be served. Sadness that it had come to this, that my own son had turned out to be a criminal who saw his elderly mother as nothing more than a target to exploit. But I didn't have long to process these emotions, because Marcus and Rebecca were about to make their situation much worse. Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from my bank's fraud department. Mrs. Brooks, we're calling about some unusual activity on your accounts. Someone has been attempting to access your online banking using what appears to be legitimate login credentials. What kind of access? They've been trying to transfer funds from your savings account to an external account in Colorado. Our security systems flagged it because the transfer amount was unusually large, $50,000. I felt cold fury wash over me. The attempts are coming from Colorado? Yes, ma'am. We've blocked the attempts and flagged your account for additional security. Have you shared your login information with anyone? No, I haven't. But I knew exactly how they'd gotten it. Marcus had been collecting my financial information for months, probably including passwords I'd used on their computer or written down where he could see them. I immediately called Detective Rodriguez. They're trying to steal directly from my bank accounts now, I told her. $50,000. We're accelerating the timeline. I'll have the arrest warrants issued tomorrow. Wednesday morning, David Martinez called me with an update that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Brooks, I've been monitoring their social media and financial activity. Yesterday, Marcus and Rebecca sold their BMW back to the dealership for cash. They also withdrew the maximum daily amount from 3 different ATMs. They're planning to run. It looks that way. And Mrs. Brooks, there's something else. I found evidence that they've been researching countries with no extradition treaties to the United States. I felt panicked. What about my grandchildren? They're not going to take Emma and Tyler and disappear, are they? I don't know, but we need to alert the authorities immediately. I called Detective Rodriguez, who immediately contacted the Colorado police and requested that Marcus and Rebecca be located and monitored. Mrs. Brooks, I'm coordinating with Colorado authorities to do a welfare check on your grandchildren today. If Marcus and Rebecca attempt to leave the state with the children, they'll be stopped. Thursday morning, I got the call I'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. Mrs. Brooks, this is Detective Rodriguez. We executed arrest warrants for Marcus Brooks and Rebecca Brooks this morning. They're both in custody in Colorado. What about my grandchildren? They're safe. When officers arrived at the house, they found that Marcus and Rebecca had the children's passports and had purchased plane tickets to Mexico for this afternoon. The children are currently with Colorado Child Services while we sort out temporary custody. I sank into my chair. They were really going to take Emma and Tyler and disappear. It appears so. Mrs. Brooks, when we searched their house, we found a safe containing over $30,000 in cash, stolen financial documents from multiple elderly victims, and detailed plans for establishing new identities in Mexico. Multiple victims? Your son and daughter-in-law have been running this scam on elderly family members for years. We found evidence of fraud against at least 5 different people, including Rebecca's parents, an elderly aunt of Marcus's, and 2 former neighbors, who trusted them to help with financial planning. I felt sick thinking about all the other families who had been destroyed by Marcus and Rebecca's greed. What happens now? They'll be extradited to Arizona to face charges here, since you're the primary victim and this is where the investigation originated. Based on the evidence, they're looking at 10-15 years in prison each. And the children? That's being handled by Colorado Child Services. They'll need to place the children with suitable family members or foster care until this is resolved. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Marcus and Rebecca were finally facing consequences for their actions. Horror that they had been willing to kidnap my grandchildren and flee the country. Sadness that Emma and Tyler were now caught in the middle of their parents' criminal behavior. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of standing up for myself and winning. I called Helen immediately. Ruth, I heard on the news that Marcus and Rebecca were arrested. How are you holding up? I'm okay. Tired, but okay. Helen, I need to ask you something. The children need temporary custody while this gets sorted out. Would you consider? Yes, she said immediately. Of course. Those kids don't deserve to pay for their parents' crimes. Are you sure? You've never had children, and Emma and Tyler are going to be traumatized and confused. Ruth, their family, real family, not the kind that abandons you on highways and steals from you. I'll figure it out. That afternoon, I spoke with the Colorado Child Services caseworker about Helen taking temporary custody of Emma and Tyler. Ms. Walsh seems very committed to providing a stable environment for the children, the caseworker said. We'll need to do background checks and a home study, but based on our conversation with her, I think this could work well. What about me? Will I be able to see my grandchildren? Mrs. Brooks, based on our investigation, we've determined that the report filed against you was false. You'll have full visitation rights, and once Ms. Walsh is approved for custody, the children can visit you as well. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful about the future. That evening, Margaret called with an update on the financial recovery. Ruth, with Marcus and Rebecca in custody, we can proceed with the house sale immediately. Based on current market value, after paying off their remaining mortgage and legal fees, you should recover approximately $95,000, more than the original loan amount. What about the other victims, Rebecca's parents and the others? That will be handled through the criminal restitution process. The court will order Marcus and Rebecca to pay back everyone they defrauded, though realistically, most of that money is probably gone. I want to do something for Rebecca's parents. They're elderly and on a fixed income, just like I am. That's very generous of you, Ruth. It's not generous. It's right. We're all victims of the same criminals. We should look out for each other. Friday afternoon, I received a call that I'd been both anticipating and dreading. Grandma Ruth? It was Emma's voice, small and scared. Emma! Sweetheart, how are you? I'm confused, Grandma. The police came and took Mommy and Daddy away, and now Tyler and I are staying with strangers. Did we do something wrong? My heart broke for her. Oh, honey, no. You and Tyler didn't do anything wrong. Your parents made some very bad choices, and now they have to face the consequences. The lady from the government said we might get to live with your sister Helen for a while. Is she nice? She's wonderful, Emma. She's going to take very good care of you and Tyler. Will we get to see you? As much as you want, sweetheart. I love you and Tyler so much. Grandma Ruth, I'm sorry about what happened on the mountain. I didn't understand why Mommy and Daddy left you there. It made me sad. Tears ran down my cheeks. It's not your fault, Emma. You don't need to apologize for anything. Will Mommy and Daddy come back? I don't know, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, you and Tyler will always be loved and taken care of. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and reflected on everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, I had been a naive grandmother who thought the worst thing my son could do was take advantage of my generosity. Now I understood that I had been living with a predator who saw me not as his mother, but as a victim to be exploited and discarded. But I also understood something else. I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had stood up to people who tried to destroy me, and I had won. Not just financially, but morally. I had refused to be a victim, and in doing so, I had protected not just myself, but other potential victims who might have come after me. The next morning, I woke up and did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled when I looked in the mirror. Had fought for my dignity, my financial security, and my relationship with my grandchildren, and I had won on all counts. Marcus and Rebecca had thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman who would quietly accept whatever treatment they chose to dish out. They had been very, very wrong. As I made my morning coffee, I thought about Emma and Tyler, who would be coming to live with Helen next week. They would need stability, love, and honest answers about what their parents had done. It wouldn't be easy, but Helen and I would make sure they understood that families are supposed to protect and support each other, not exploit and manipulate. Most importantly, we would make sure they grew up knowing the difference between genuine love and transactional manipulation. I poured my coffee and sat down to call Helen and start planning for the children's arrival. I had a new family to build, one based on respect, honesty, and genuine care. It was going to be a beautiful, fresh start. The week following Marcus and Rebecca's arrest was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and emotional upheaval that I never could have anticipated. What started as a personal family betrayal had mushroomed into a criminal case that would expose a network of elder abuse spanning multiple states. Monday morning, Detective Rodriguez called me with news that made my head spin. "Mrs. Brooks, I need you to come down to the station. We've been going through Marcus and Rebecca's computers and financial records, and we've uncovered something that changes the scope of this case dramatically." "What do you mean?" "I'd rather show you in person." "Can you be here in an hour?" I arrived at the Phoenix Police Department to find Detective Rodriguez waiting with FBI agent Jennifer Chen and a woman I didn't recognize wearing a business suit. "Mrs. Brooks," Detective Rodriguez said, "this is Agent Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and this is Victoria Marsh from the Colorado Attorney General's office. What we've discovered goes far beyond what we initially thought." "Agent E." Chen leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks, your son and daughter-in-law weren't just running a family scam. They were part of an organized network that specifically targets elderly individuals across multiple states." I felt my stomach drop. "A network?" Victoria Marsh opened a thick folder. "We've identified at least 47 victims in Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. The total amount stolen appears to be over $2.8 million. $2.8 million? "The scheme works like this," Agent Chen explained. "Marcus and Rebecca would identify elderly individuals through social media, public records, and community connections. They'd research their financial situations, family relationships, and vulnerabilities. Then they'd approach with manufactured crises designed to appeal to the target's emotions." Detective Rodriguez pulled out a printed document. "We found detailed profiles on dozens of elderly people. Look at this." She showed me a file with my name on it. Inside was information about my late husband's insurance policy, my retirement savings, my relationship with Marcus, even photos of my apartment and car. "They've been watching me for years," I said, feeling violated. "Not just you. Look at this." Victoria showed me another file, this one labeled Targets High Priority. It contained profiles of elderly individuals with substantial assets and complicated family relationships. Each profile included detailed personal information, family dynamics, and something that made my blood run cold: a manipulation strategy tailored to each victim. "Mrs. Brooks," Agent Chen said, "your case broke this whole thing open. When we traced the financial records from Marcus and Rebecca's arrest, we found connections to similar schemes in other states. You weren't just a victim. You were the key to exposing a criminal enterprise." "How many people were involved?" "At least 12 that we've identified so far. Marcus and Rebecca were mid-level operators. They reported to someone higher up who coordinated the targeting and money laundering." Victoria Marsh leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks, we need your help. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled operation to help us identify the ringleaders?" "What kind of operation?" "We want to arrange a meeting between you and the person Marcus and Rebecca reported to. We'd have you wired for audio and video, with full surveillance and protection." I thought about all the elderly people who had been victimized by this network. People like Rebecca's parents, who had been cut off from their grandchildren after being robbed. People who might be sitting alone right now, wondering how their own family members could have betrayed them so completely. What would I have to do? Agent Chen explained the plan. Marcus has been contacted by his handler, someone who goes by the name Thompson, who wants to know why the Arizona operation went sideways. We're going to arrange for you to meet with Thompson under the pretense of wanting to resolve this quietly to avoid further criminal charges against Marcus. Is it dangerous? There will be some risk, Agent Chen admitted. but we'll have teams positioned throughout the area, and you'll be fully monitored. These are financial criminals, not violent offenders, but we take every precaution. I thought about Emma and Tyler, who were arriving at Helen's house later that week. I thought about all the other grandchildren who might be used as weapons against their grandparents in the future if this network continued operating. I'll do it. The next few days were spent in preparation for the operation. I was fitted with nearly invisible recording devices and coached on how to conduct the conversation to get the information the FBI needed. Remember, Agent Chen said, during one of our practice sessions, "You're a scared, confused elderly woman who just wants this nightmare to end. You're willing to pay money to make the criminal charges against your son go away." How much money? We're going to tell Thompson that you're willing to pay $200,000 to make this all disappear. That should be enough to get him to reveal the full scope of the operation and incriminate himself. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop in Scottsdale, wearing a wire and feeling more nervous than I had in my entire life. Thompson was supposed to arrive at 3 p.m. At 2:45, a man in his 50s approached my table. "Ruth Brooks? Yes? I'm Michael Thompson. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Thompson was nothing like what I had expected. He was well-dressed, soft-spoken, and had the kind of gentle demeanor that would put elderly people at ease. He could have been someone's kindly uncle or a trusted financial advisor. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, sitting across from me, "I want to start by saying how sorry I am about this situation with Marcus and Rebecca. Sometimes the people we work with get overzealous." Work with? I help families resolve financial difficulties discreetly. Marcus came to me over a year ago because of his gambling problems. I connected him with people who could help him access the resources he needed to get back on his feet. By stealing from his mother? Thompson's expression remained sympathetic. "Mrs. Brooks, I prefer to think of it as redistributing family wealth more efficiently. You have resources you're not using. Marcus had immediate needs. We simply facilitated a transfer that benefited everyone." The casual way he described theft as redistributing family wealth made my skin crawl. But now Marcus and Rebecca are in jail, and my grandchildren are in foster care. That's why I wanted to meet with you. This situation can still be resolved quietly. You don't want to see your son go to prison, do you? Of course not. I have connections with some very skilled attorneys who specialize in these kinds of cases. They can make the criminal charges disappear, arrange for Marcus and Rebecca to get counseling instead of prison time, and ensure that your grandchildren are returned to their parents. What would that cost? $200,000. I know. It sounds like a lot, but consider what you're getting. Your family back together, no criminal record for Marcus, and complete discretion about what happened. I pretended to consider this. "How do I know you can really make this happen?" Thompson smiled. "Mrs. Brooks, I've been helping families resolve these issues for over 10 years. I have an excellent track record. Let me show you something." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a family. Elderly parents with their adult children and grandchildren, all smiling at what looked like a holiday gathering. The Hendersons in Colorado. Last year, their son borrowed $150,000 from them for what he called a business investment. When they started asking questions about repayment, things got complicated. I helped them resolve the situation. Everyone's happy now. What really happened? The son needed to pay off some debts quickly. The parents had the money but were being stubborn about family obligations. We helped them understand that sometimes family means making sacrifices for the greater good. By stealing from them, Thompson's smile never wavered. By helping them see the bigger picture. Mrs. Brooks, elderly people often hoard money they don't really need while their children struggle with immediate problems. We provide a service that benefits everyone. How many families have you helped? Dozens. It's quite a successful model. We identify elderly individuals with substantial assets and adult children who have financial pressures. Then we develop Appropriate intervention strategies. Intervention strategies? Each situation requires a customized approach. Sometimes it's a medical emergency that needs immediate funding. Sometimes it's a grandchild's education or a family crisis. The key is finding the emotional leverage that motivates elderly people to share their resources willingly. And if they don't cooperate, Thompson's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Brooks, most elderly people want to help their families. They just need proper encouragement to overcome their natural reluctance to part with money they're not using. What kind of encouragement? Sometimes isolation helps them understand their dependence on family. Sometimes they need to experience the consequences of being uncooperative. In your case, Marcus thought a road trip where you could discuss your priorities away from distractions would be helpful. I realized he was talking about the highway abandonment as if it were a therapeutic intervention. You told Marcus to leave me on that highway? I suggested that sometimes elderly people need a dramatic demonstration of their vulnerability to help them make better decisions about family cooperation. I was recording a confession to conspiracy, elder abuse, and who knows what other crimes. How many people are involved in this service you provide? We have a network of trained professionals across several states, financial advisors, social workers, family counselors, people who understand how to help elderly individuals make appropriate decisions about resource allocation. How does the money work? Simple. The elderly person transfers funds to resolve their family members' crisis. A percentage covers our consulting fees, and the rest goes to address the immediate need. What percentage? Usually 60%. It's a fair fee for the complexity of the work involved. I was stunned. They were keeping 60% of the money they stole and giving the remaining 40% to the family members who participated in the scam. Mr. Thompson, this sounds very complicated. How do I know this is legitimate? Mrs. Brooks, let me be completely honest with you. What Marcus and Rebecca did was technically illegal, but the system is designed to protect elderly people from financial abuse, not to help families resolve internal resource allocation issues. Sometimes we have to work outside traditional legal frameworks to achieve the best outcomes for everyone. He was admitting that the entire operation was criminal, while trying to frame it as a public service. What would happen if I decided not to pay the $200,000? Thompson's friendly demeanor shifted slightly. Mrs. Brooks, that would be unfortunate. Marcus and Rebecca are facing serious prison time. Your grandchildren could end up in long-term foster care. There might be additional complications. What kind of complications? Sometimes when elderly people are uncooperative, we discover additional financial irregularities that require investigation. Tax issues, unreported income, improper benefit claims. The government takes these things very seriously. He was threatening to frame me for financial crimes if I didn't pay him $200,000. Mr. Thompson, I need some time to think about this. Of course. But Mrs. Brooks, time is a factor. The longer Marcus and Rebecca remain in custody, the more difficult it becomes to resolve their situation quietly. I'd recommend making a decision by Friday. How would I get you the money? I'll provide you with wire transfer instructions. The funds would go to a legal defense account that my attorneys manage. Very discreet, very professional. And you guarantee that Marcus and Rebecca would be released? Mrs. Brooks, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never had a family that wasn't completely satisfied with the outcome. As Thompson left the coffee shop, I sat there for several minutes, making sure my recording devices had captured everything. I had just listened to a man casually describe a multi-million-dollar elder abuse operation as if he were selling insurance. Agent Chen approached my table within minutes. Mrs. Brooks, that was incredible. We got everything we needed and more. Did you hear what he said about other families? About keeping 60% of the stolen money? We heard it all. This is going to bring down the entire network. That evening, Agent Chen called to update me on the investigation's progress. Based on Thompson's statements and the financial records we've seized, we've identified the locations of at least 37 more victims. We're coordinating with local authorities in 4 states to make arrests simultaneously. What about the money? Can any of it be recovered? Some of it. Thompson was telling the truth about one thing. He's been very successful. We've found accounts containing over $800,000 that we can trace directly to victim payments. What happens to that money? It gets returned to the victims through the court's restitution process. Mrs. Brooks, because of your cooperation, dozens of families are going to get their money back. The following morning, I woke up to news coverage of what the media was calling Operation Family Trust, coordinated arrests across 4 states that had dismantled what prosecutors described as one of the most sophisticated elder abuse networks ever uncovered. The news reported that 14 people had been arrested, including financial advisors, social workers, and family members who had been participating in the scheme. The total amount stolen was estimated at over $3.2 million, with victims ranging in age from 65 to 94. My phone rang constantly that day. Reporters wanted interviews. Victim advocates wanted to thank me. Other elderly people who suspected they might have been targeted called to ask for advice. But the call that mattered most came from Helen. "Ruth, I just saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. How are Emma and Tyler adjusting?" "They're confused and scared, but they're resilient. Emma keeps asking when you're coming to visit. How about this weekend?" "They'd love that." "Ruth, there's something I need to tell you. Tyler asked me yesterday if Mommy and Daddy are bad people. What did you tell him?" "I told him that Mommy and Daddy made very bad choices, but that doesn't mean they don't love him and Emma. I said sometimes people we love do things that hurt other people, and when that happens, there have to be consequences." "That's perfect, Helen." "Ruth, he also asked if you're mad at him and Emma for what happened on the mountain." My heart broke. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that you love him and Emma more than anything in the world, and that you could never be mad at them for something their parents did." "Helen, I need to ask you something. Are you prepared for this to be long-term? Marcus and Rebecca are probably going to prison for years." "Ruth, these kids need stability and love. If you're willing to be their grandmother, I'm willing to be their guardian for as long as they need me." That weekend, I flew to Denver to visit Emma and Tyler at Helen's house. When I walked through the front door, Emma ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Grandma Ruth, I missed you so much." Tyler was more reserved, hanging back and watching me carefully. "Tyler, sweetheart, how are you?" "Grandma Ruth, did Mommy and Daddy really steal money from you?" I knelt down to his eye level. "Yes, they did." "Are they going to jail?" "Probably, yes." Tyler thought about this for a moment. "Are you sad about that?" "I'm sad that they made choices that hurt a lot of people, but I'm not sad that they have to face consequences for those choices." "Am I going to get in trouble for what they did?" "Tyler, you and Emma didn't do anything wrong. You're not responsible for your parents' choices. And you're not going to get in trouble for anything they did." Emma looked up at me. "Grandma Ruth, Aunt Helen said we might get to live with her for a long time. Is that okay with you?" "Emma, I think that's wonderful. Aunt Helen loves you very much, and she's going to take excellent care of you and Tyler. But we'll still get to see you, right?" "As much as you want, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." That evening, after the children were in bed, Helen and I sat in her kitchen talking about the future. "Ruth, I need to be honest with you. Taking care of Emma and Tyler is going to be expensive. I'm willing to do it, but I'm going to need help with things like childcare and activities and college savings." "Helen, whatever you need. I got the house sale money back, plus more from the restitution fund. I want Emma and Tyler to have everything they need." "It's not just about money, Ruth. They're going to need therapy to process what their parents did. They're going to have questions about why this happened. Emma keeps drawing pictures of the family, but she leaves out Marcus and Rebecca. We'll figure it out together." "Helen, you're giving these children something their parents never did: unconditional love and stability. That's worth more than any amount of money. The following week, I received a call from Linda Walsh with an update on the criminal proceedings. Ruth, Marcus, and Rebecca have been offered plea deals. If they plead guilty and cooperate fully with the investigation, they'll serve 8 to 12 years instead of the 20-plus years they could face if they go to trial. What does cooperation mean? Testifying against Thompson and the other network leaders, providing information about additional victims, and helping to recover more stolen assets. Have they accepted? Marcus has. Rebecca is still deciding. But Ruth, there's something else. Marcus wants to write a letter to you. What kind of letter? Apparently, he wants to apologize and explain what happened from his perspective. I thought about this for a moment. Part of me wanted to understand how my son had become someone capable of abandoning his elderly mother on a highway. Part of me never wanted to hear from him again. Can I think about it? Of course. There's no pressure either way. That night, I called my therapist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez who specialized in family trauma and elder abuse. I had started seeing her after the highway incident to help process everything that had happened. Dr. Martinez, Marcus wants to write me a letter of apology. Should I read it? That depends. What do you hope to gain from it? I don't know. Maybe I want to understand how someone I raised could do what he did. Ruth, from what you've told me about the investigation, Marcus was involved in a sophisticated criminal enterprise. His actions weren't just personal failures. They were calculated choices made over a long period of time. But he's still my son. He is. And part of grieving this situation is accepting that the son you thought you knew may never have existed. The person who abandoned you on that highway and stole from you wasn't acting out of character. He was showing you who he really is. So you think I shouldn't read the letter? I think you should only read it if you're prepared for it to be another form of manipulation. People like Marcus don't suddenly develop genuine remorse when they get caught. They develop strategic remorse designed to minimize consequences. Decided not to read Marcus's letter. Instead, I focused on the future. I helped Helen enroll Emma and Tyler in therapy. I set up college savings accounts for both children. I worked with victim advocates to support other elderly people who had been targeted by the network. And most importantly, I rebuilt my understanding of what family really means. Family isn't about blood relations or legal obligations. It's about people who protect each other, support each other, and treat each other with respect and love. Marcus and Rebecca had never been my family in that sense. They had been people who used family connections to exploit and manipulate me. But Helen was family. Emma and Tyler were family. The kind stranger Jake at the gas station who helped me when I was abandoned, he showed more family loyalty in one afternoon than Marcus had shown in years. I was 70 years old, and I was finally learning the difference between being related to someone and actually being family. It was a lesson I wished I had learned decades earlier, but I was grateful to understand it now. 6 months after Marcus and Rebecca's arrest, I stood in the courtroom watching my son be sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He looked older, thinner, and completely defeated as the judge read the charges: conspiracy to commit elder abuse, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Rebecca sat at a separate table with her attorney. She had refused the plea deal and was facing trial for additional charges, including the false CPS report and identity theft. Her gamble had backfired spectacularly. She was now looking at 25 years minimum. As the judge spoke about the calculated cruelty and systematic exploitation of vulnerable elderly victims, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not satisfaction or revenge, but genuine peace with the knowledge that justice was being served. Marcus Brooks, the judge said, your actions represent a profound betrayal of the trust that forms the foundation of family relationships. You targeted your own mother, a woman who had supported you financially and emotionally throughout your entire life, and you exploited her love for you and her grandchildren to steal from her and ultimately abandon her on a remote highway. Marcus's lawyer had tried to argue for leniency, claiming that Marcus was himself a victim of Thompson's manipulation and his gambling addiction. But the evidence was overwhelming. The detailed victim profiles, the social media bragging, the systematic collection of my financial information. It all painted a picture of someone who had been a willing and active participant in criminal conspiracy. The court finds that your actions were not impulsive or the result of temporary poor judgment, the judge continued. They represent a pattern of calculated criminal behavior that caused immeasurable harm not only to your mother, but to dozens of other elderly victims across multiple states. When it came time for victim impact statements, I had chosen not to speak. I had said everything I needed to say to investigators, prosecutors, and ultimately to myself. Instead, I had written a letter that was read aloud by the prosecutor. Your Honor, for 70 years I believed that family meant unconditional love and support. Marcus Brooks taught me that I was wrong. Family is not about blood relations or legal obligations. It is about people who choose to protect, respect, and care for each other. Marcus Brooks chose to see me not as his mother, but as a target for exploitation. In doing so, he lost the right to call himself my son. However, his actions also led me to discover what real family looks like. It looks like my sister Helen, who drove 3 hours to rescue me from a gas station when Marcus abandoned me. It looks like a kind stranger named Jake, who showed me more compassion in one afternoon than Marcus showed me in years. It looks like the FBI agents and prosecutors who worked tirelessly to ensure that other elderly people would not suffer the same betrayal I did. Marcus Brooks may have destroyed the family I thought I had, but he helped me find the family I actually needed. As we left the courthouse, Helen and I walked past Marcus in handcuffs being led to a transport van. He looked at me through the window, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. But then I remembered Thompson's words about strategic remorse and Dr. Martinez's warning about manipulation, and I looked away. Emma and Tyler had not attended the sentencing. At ages 12 and 8, they didn't need to see their father being led away in chains. They were dealing with enough trauma already. Over the past 6 months, both children had been in therapy to process what their parents had done. Emma had initially blamed herself, thinking that somehow her behavior had caused the family breakup. Tyler had become withdrawn and had nightmares about being abandoned. But slowly, with professional help and a lot of love from Helen and me, they were beginning to heal. Emma was thriving in her new school in Denver. Her art teacher had noticed her talent and arranged for her to attend weekend classes at a local art institute. She was creating beautiful, complex paintings that showed a maturity beyond her years. Tyler had joined a youth soccer league and was making friends with kids who didn't know anything about his family's history. He was starting to smile again and had even asked Helen if he could invite friends over for sleepovers. Both children were learning what it meant to live in a household where adults didn't lie to them, manipulate them, or use them as weapons against other people. The house sale had been finalized, and I had recovered $127,000 after all legal fees and expenses. Combined with the restitution payments from the criminal case, I was actually in better financial shape than I had been before Marcus's initial loan request. But more importantly, I had used the experience to completely restructure my understanding of financial security and retirement. I had worked with a fee-only financial planner to create a comprehensive plan that protected my assets while allowing me to be generous with the people I truly cared about. I set up education trusts for Emma and Tyler. I established a fund to help Helen with the ongoing costs of raising 2 children. I even sent money to Rebecca's parents, who had welcomed me with tears when I called to introduce myself and apologize for what Marcus and Rebecca had done to them as well. "Ruth," Rebecca's mother had said during our first phone conversation, "you don't need to apologize for anything. We're the ones who should apologize. We raised the daughter who helped hurt you. Mrs. Martinez, we were all victims of the same criminals. The only people who need to apologize are the people who chose to hurt their own families. Rebecca's parents and I had become close friends over the past few months. They were lovely people who had been devastated by their daughter's betrayal. Like me, they had been cut off from their grandchildren and had spent months wondering what they had done wrong. We met for coffee regularly and had even planned a trip together to visit Emma and Tyler. The children were excited to meet their other grandparents and to hear stories about the family members who actually loved them. The network investigation had ultimately led to 37 arrests across 6 states. Thompson received a 25-year sentence and was ordered to pay $3.1 million in restitution. The family financial counseling business he had been running was revealed to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had targeted over 200 elderly victims. Many of the stolen funds were recovered and returned to victims. Several families were reunited after having been torn apart by the manipulation tactics the network used to isolate elderly people from family members who might have protected them. I had been interviewed by several news programs and had become something of an advocate for elder abuse awareness. The story of a 70-year-old grandmother who brought down a multi-million-dollar criminal network had captured public attention and had led to increased funding for elder abuse investigations. But the real victory wasn't the money recovered or the criminals imprisoned. The real victory was the transformation in my own life and the lives of Emma and Tyler. 1 year after the highway abandonment, I was sitting in Helen's backyard, watching Tyler practice soccer tricks while Emma painted a landscape of the mountains visible beyond Helen's fence. "Grandma Ruth," Emma said, looking up from her canvas. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you ever miss Daddy and Mommy?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "I miss the people I thought they were. But Emma, I've learned that missing someone and wanting them in your life are 2 different things." "What do you mean?" "I miss the idea of having a son who loved and respected me. But I don't miss being lied to, stolen from, or abandoned on highways. I don't miss being manipulated or having my love used as a weapon against me." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Aunt Helen says that sometimes people we love aren't healthy for us to be around." "Aunt Helen is very wise. Grandma Ruth, are Tyler and I healthy for you to be around?" I laughed and hugged her. "Emma, you and Tyler are the best thing that ever happened to me. You make my life brighter and happier every single day." "Even though we're not your real grandchildren anymore since Daddy's in jail?" "Emma, listen to me very carefully. You and Tyler will always be my real grandchildren, no matter what happens to your parents. Love isn't something that can be taken away by lawyers or judges or anyone else. It's something we choose to give each other every day." Tyler had stopped practicing and was listening to our conversation. "Grandma Ruth," he said, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." "What do you mean, Tyler?" "I want to be strong like you. When bad things happened, you didn't just cry. You fought back and won." "Tyler, crying is okay too. I cried a lot when all this was happening. But you're right that fighting back was important. Sometimes we have to stand up for ourselves, even when it's scary or hard. Will you teach me how to be strong like that?" "Tyler, you're already strong. Look at everything you and Emma have been through, and look how well you're doing. You're both incredibly brave and resilient." Emma wiped paint off her hands. "Grandma Ruth, at school they asked us to write about our heroes. I wrote about you." "What did you say?" "I said that my hero is my grandmother who was abandoned on a highway by bad people. But instead of giving up, she called the police and helped catch lots of criminals and saved other grandparents from getting hurt." I felt tears in my eyes. "Emma, that's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said about me." "It's true, though. You are a hero." That evening, after the children were in bed, Helen and I sat on her porch drinking wine and talking about the future. "Ruth, I've been thinking about something. Emma and Tyler are going to need college funds, and with Tyler's soccer talent, he might need money for travel teams and training. Whatever they need, Helen. I want them to have every opportunity. It's not just about money, though. They're going to need stability for years to come. I love having them here, but I'm 65 years old. What happens when I get too old to take care of teenagers? Helen, are you having second thoughts about the guardianship? No, not at all. But I think we need to make some long-term plans. These kids are going to need us for the next 10 years minimum. What are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe it's time for you to move to Denver, permanently. I had been considering this possibility for months. My retirement community in Phoenix was comfortable, but it was also a place I had chosen based on my old life. A life that had included regular visits with Marcus and Rebecca, holiday gatherings that would never happen again, and a family structure that no longer existed. Helen, are you sure you want your big sister cramping your style? Ruth, we're both single women in our 70s. Our style is drinking wine on the porch and spoiling our grandchildren. I think we can do that. Better together than apart. What would the living arrangements be? I've been looking at properties. There's a house about 10 minutes from here with a main house and a separate in-law suite. We could have our own spaces but be close enough to share responsibility for Emma and Tyler. The idea was appealing. Over the past year, I had come to realize that the retirement I had planned, quiet, independent, focused on personal hobbies and social activities, wasn't what I actually wanted. What I wanted was to be part of Emma and Tyler's daily lives. I wanted to help with homework, attend soccer games, and be there for all the small moments that make up childhood. I wanted to be the kind of grandmother that Marcus and Rebecca had tried to prevent me from being. Actively involved, financially, supportive and emotionally present. Let's look at the house, I said. The following weekend, Helen and I toured a beautiful property in a family-friendly neighborhood with excellent schools. The main house had 4 bedrooms, plenty of space for Helen, Emma, and Tyler, plus guests. The in-law suite was a separate building with its own kitchen, living room, bedroom, and bathroom. It would give me privacy and independence while keeping me close to the children. What do you think? Helen asked as we stood in the kitchen of the main house. I think Emma and Tyler would love having this much space, and that backyard is perfect for Tyler's soccer practice. Ruth, there's something else I want to discuss. The asking price is $485,000. I can probably handle the down payment, but the monthly mortgage would be tight on my income. Helen, what if we bought it together? Equal partners. Are you sure? Helen, you're taking care of my grandchildren. You've completely reorganized your life to give them stability and love. The least I can do is help with housing costs. We made an offer that afternoon. 2 weeks later, our offer was accepted, and we began the process of creating a new home for our unconventional family. Emma was thrilled about the move. She had already picked out which room would be hers and had started planning how to decorate it. Tyler was excited about the large backyard and the fact that several of his new friends lived in the same neighborhood. But the conversation I treasured most happened on a Saturday morning while Helen and I were packing boxes in my Phoenix apartment. "Grandma Ruth," Tyler said, "I'm glad Daddy and Mommy went to jail." Tyler, why would you say that? Because if they hadn't gone to jail, we wouldn't have gotten to live with you and Aunt Helen. And you're better parents than they were. Tyler, Helen and I aren't your parents. We're your guardians. What's the difference? Well, parents are usually the people who gave birth to you or adopted you legally. Guardians are people who take care of you when your parents can't. Tyler thought about this for a moment. But you and Aunt Helen love Emma and me more than Mommy and Daddy did. What makes you think that? Mommy and Daddy used to fight about money all the time. They used to say that Emma and I were expensive and that we made their life harder. You and Aunt Helen never say things like that. Tyler, having children costs money, and sometimes parents worry about that. It doesn't mean they don't love their children. But Grandma Ruth, You and Aunt Helen never make us feel bad about costing money. When Emma needed art supplies for her class, you just bought them. When I wanted to join the soccer team, Aunt Helen just signed me up. Mommy and Daddy would have made us feel guilty about asking. Out of the mouths of babes. Tyler, at 8 years old, understood something that had taken me 70 years to learn. Real love doesn't come with conditions, guilt, or manipulation. Attached. The closing on the Denver house happened in early December. We planned to move in during Emma and Tyler's winter break from school, so the transition wouldn't disrupt their education. As I packed up my Phoenix apartment, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago, I had been a naive grandmother who thought family loyalty meant enabling other people's bad behavior and accepting mistreatment in the name of keeping the peace. Now I was someone who understood that love without respect is just exploitation, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries and enforce consequences. I had learned to tell the difference between people who loved me and people who loved what I could do for them. Most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to start over and build the life you actually want. Moving day was chaotic, but joyful. Emma and Tyler ran through the new house claiming bedrooms and making plans for how to arrange their toys and books. Helen and I followed behind them, laughing at their excitement and marveling at how quickly children can adapt to new circumstances when they feel safe and loved. That evening, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating off paper plates and talking about our plans for the future. "Grandma Ruth," Emma said, "can we have a garden in the backyard?" "That's a wonderful idea. What would you like to grow?" "Vegetables and flowers for painting," Tyler chimed in. "Can we get a dog?" Helen and I exchanged glances. "Let's get settled in first, and then we can talk about a dog." "Is that a yes?" Tyler pressed. "It's a maybe," I said. "But it's a strong maybe." As we sat there in our new home, surrounded by boxes and possibilities, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment. I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the people who mattered most to me. 6 months later, I received a letter from the Colorado Department of Corrections. Marcus was requesting a meeting. I showed the letter to Dr. Martinez during our monthly therapy session. "How do you feel about this request, Ruth?" "Honestly, nothing. I don't feel angry or curious or even sad. I just feel nothing." That's actually very healthy. It means you've successfully detached from the relationship and stopped defining yourself in relation to his actions. Should I meet with him? What would you hope to accomplish? I don't know. Maybe I'm curious about whether he's actually changed or if this is just another manipulation. Ruth, does it matter? Whether Marcus has genuinely changed or is still trying to manipulate people doesn't affect your life anymore. You've moved on. She was right. I declined the meeting request. Instead, I spent that weekend teaching Emma how to plant tomatoes in our garden, while Tyler practiced penalty kicks against the garage door. These were the moments that mattered now, not looking backward at betrayals and disappointments, but looking forward to soccer games and art shows and graduation ceremonies and all the ordinary miracles that make up a life well lived. On the 1-year anniversary of the highway abandonment, Helen, Emma, Tyler, and I drove up to Rocky Mountain National Park for a family camping trip. As we sat around our campfire roasting marshmallows, Emma asked me a question that perfectly captured how far we'd all come. "Grandma Ruth, are you glad that Daddy left you on the highway?" "Emma, that's a strange question. Why would I be glad about that?" "Because if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be a family now." I looked around at the 3 people who had become my chosen family. Helen, who had dropped everything to rescue me, and then completely reorganized her life to help raise my grandchildren. Emma, who was growing into a thoughtful, artistic young woman with an enormous capacity for love. And Tyler, who was learning to be strong and kind in equal measure. Emma, I said. I'm not glad that your father abandoned me on a highway. That was a cruel and terrible thing to do, but I am glad that his actions led us to become the family we are now. Even though Daddy and Mommy aren't here? Emma, the people who are supposed to love you are the people who show up for you, protect you, and put your well-being ahead of their own convenience. That's not always the people you're related to by blood. Tyler looked up from his marshmallow. So we're a real family even though we don't have the same last name? Tyler, we're more than a real family. We're a chosen family. We chose each other, and we keep choosing each other every day. As I watched Emma and Tyler chase fireflies in the gathering darkness while Helen banked the campfire, I realized something profound. Marcus and Rebecca had thought they were destroying my life when they abandoned me on that highway. Instead, they had set me free to build the life I was meant to have. They had thought they were leaving behind a helpless old woman who would come crawling back, desperate for any scraps of affection they were willing to offer. Instead, they had left behind a woman who was finally ready to stop accepting less than she deserved. I was 71 years old, and I was just getting started. 3 years later, Emma graduated from middle school as valedictorian and was accepted to a prestigious art academy for high school. Her painting of our family camping trip won first place in a statewide youth art competition. Tyler made the varsity soccer team as a freshman and was being scouted by college recruiters. More importantly, he had grown into a young man who stood up for other kids who were being bullied. Helen published a cookbook called Cooking for Your Chosen Family that became a bestseller among empty nesters who had taken in grandchildren or created unconventional family arrangements. I became a certified elder abuse prevention advocate and traveled around the country speaking at conferences and training programs. My story helped change laws in 12 states to better protect elderly people from financial exploitation by family members. Marcus was released after serving 8 years of his sentence. He moved to a different state and did not attempt to contact me or his children. Rebecca served her full sentence and likewise disappeared from our lives completely. Emma and Tyler legally changed their last names to Brooks Walsh, keeping their connection to me while honoring Helen's role as their guardian. And me, I learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. The best revenge is living well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.